Hello, listeners of Illusion. This episode is made up of the audio of a special vodcast episode we did of the show. If you want to see the video, I'm afraid you're going to have to join our Patreon. You can do so at patreon.com/nightmarepod for as little as $1 a month. On with the show.
This is serious stuff, you know.
Serious business, okay.
Okay, so welcome, listeners of Illusion, to Temporal Discussion. This is the episode-by-episode retrospective Nightmare podcast, and I am one half of the Gestalt entity that is known as the Two Night Martins, but I'm not Martin Harder.
Yeah, and it may surprise you to know that I'm not Martin Harder. I'm, in fact, Nightmare connoisseur, voice actor, and YouTuber Amy Davis.
Yes, unfortunately, Mr. H is entirely unfit for duty today due to a case of frost action, or actually... he was just too lazy, so he said, Martin, you go and do it, will you? You know.
Pretty much.
Those of you with keen ears and with a long time aficionados of the Nightmare online community may well recognise Amy's voice from a couple of the Duns Helm Players specials we put out recently, and indeed from some of the other Duns Helm Players plays that we've done down the years. But most of all...
yeah, thankfully with a better microphone. Thankfully with a better microphone than I used to have.
Nowadays, well, so's mine. I'm not going to deny my shame on that. But most of you will recognise her from her YouTube channel, Queen Creeps, and as the voice of Grisha McLagan in the Harry Potter fan film Voldemort Origins of the Air. She's a bit of a star, this girl, and I'm very proud that I discovered her.
Ah, smug mode.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to bask in your reflected glory, Amy. I'm entitled to do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I've been looking forward to this. So anyway, Amy, tell me, what does Nightmare mean to you?
Okay, so yeah, like you said, Nightmare was actually my introduction to voice acting, because you were the first voice acting director I worked under back when I was 13. I'm 22 now, so that was like...
Director.
Yeah,
Me.
Yeah.
Director. I love being massively overrated, but that's going too far. I just sent you the lines and just said, yeah, just speak them into the microphone and away you go. Director.
Christ.
No, I love that. Thank you.
But yeah, I discovered Nightmare when I was about 8 or 9 because obviously Nightmare was past my time, but I found them on the challenge reruns. And then when I was 12 years old, I just Googled it one day and found the forums and everything like that. And then I had to wait until I was 13 to actually join them. But to me, it was my first big creative outlet because I got involved with Duns Helm Players. I started writing my own fan fiction and stuff. And at the time, I was one of those people who would like rewatch things over and over again to get every single detail. So I think it was one of the first big shows that I was invested in and wanted to know everything, like that, and Raven as well. But Nightmare was a really big one. So
I often think Raven was almost copied from Nightmare in many ways. It's in an awfully, including a very similar looking host.
Inspired.
Yeah, sorry. Took inspiration from Nightmare. So, Amy, I have to ask you, because it's a tradition and it's one that's always on my mind. Did you ever watch the 1987 gangster film, The Untouchables?
I didn't know. My friends have been speaking about it recently, but no.
You're one of us. We're basically the running subject of discussion is we can never be bothered to watch it. So, and we really struggle to find any guest speaker who will actually admit to watching it. So,
oh, Christ.
So there you go. Now today we're looking at Series 2, Episode 3, which was first broadcast on September the 19th, 1988. Which is really shocking to me because I can still remember watching it as new. You don't remember it as new because you weren't around back then.
I was minus 10 years old.
Oh, the excuses you come up with not to do your homework. But yes, yes, it was. I do actually remember quite vividly watching it the very first time it was broadcast. So. I'm an old man, Amy. I'm an old man. You say this was. You mentioned to me before we started recording, though, that this is actually quite a special episode for you personally, even though you weren't around. Do tell.
It is. Well, like you said, I remember watching this vividly as well because the very first episode of Nightmare I ever watched, because I watched it on the Challenge reruns, I believe was episode 5 of series 1. But this one in particular, I remember really clearly, and I was watching it before. There's kind of like two separate memories for me when it comes to Nightmare. There's like the second memory where it's like I'm watching it now and just been like, oh yeah, this and this and this. But the first memory is where the memories are very vivid, so I can remember details, but sometimes, you know, like when you're a kid and you watch something and sometimes you remember things wrong, or you remember things differently.
All the time, including over Nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. But this is the one, for some reason, I would have been about 7 or 8 when this ran. This is the one I seem to remember consistently. Like, I was watching it before and just like, oh yeah, I remember this part and I remember this part. And also it's special because the team's from Merseyside, which is where I'm from.
I was going to mention that. You've stolen my thunder, damn you.
Yes.
I knew you'd enjoy that. Carry on.
But no, like, that was basically it. Like, I don't remember, there was bits like, I don't remember Mogdred being there because I can never seem to remember Mogdred at all. But I remember like bits like Merlin being there. I know this was the episode before, but I remember the whole Wellway scene with Traegard or like, you know, Mildred being there. And then I remember the Medusa. But yeah, that's the only episode I seem to remember where all the details are kind of bang on. So I don't know why it's this one specifically, but it must be a reason. So
as you say, it probably just because it's a team from Merseyside. There weren't many of them. So it's as good a reason as any. I mean, they're actually from just outside Liverpool, and so are you. So it's that makes it even more more of a validation for you.
Absolutely.
As you've quietly mentioned there, it's a very special episode in more ways, but we'll come to that once we get into it, I think. The Hollies were number 1 in the charts at this point with and the number 1 movie in the UK was the Phil Collins movie Buster.
Phil Collins in his motion picture debut as Buster. Keep on running. A small-time crook. Keep on hiding. Oh yeah. Be your man. With big-time dreams.
What is it? Elizabeth Taylor's jewelry?
It's a Royal Mail train. £1,000,000.
I take it you haven't watched Buster either.
I didn't know Phil Collins made movies. Nah,
but anyway, we've now set the scene of 1988, but there's also, we have to set the scene for the episode of Nightmare. So if you're ready, time turns, the fire burns, time out is gone, this podcast is on.
Welcome, watchers. Would you dare the deadliest dungeon of them all? Could you be bold and bright enough to rise to Traegard's challenge? Judge then, for one such quest is now in progress. How fare the challengers? Well, let's discover. 4 Shropshire lasses, glory bound, were forced to dash when a monster frowned. But though they fooled the talking wall, a ghostie trapped them in its thrall. And so the challenge passed in time to Chris and pals from Merseyside. The magic chalice is their quest. These lads are out to do their best. But though a snake can't make them quail, it's getting hot upon the trail. And even I have had a turn. So, will they win or will they learn?
Some of the virtual rhymes that we have in Nightmare are just criminally bad. And what we have one of the worst I've ever heard in this week's Dungeon Ditty, where Traegard dares to try and rhyme time with Merseyside. There have been some awful ones throughout the first 10 or so episodes, but that has to be right down there, really just scraping the barrel, just saying one similar letter will do. That was horrendously bad.
Team, I think you can trust that to be the real well this time. Hurry now, for life force is dangerously low, and level 2 beckons.
We start where we left off last week with Mildred's hovel. This is with Christopher and team. As you remember, we had the Mildred was putting ingredients in the cauldrons to summon up a wellway, and then temporal disruption hit. It was the very first time temporal disruption had a bell, so everybody watching it for the first watching it as new at the time thought that meant that she was casting a spell to kill Christopher. So we were very relieved when this week started and we saw Christopher was still around. But she cast the spell, and Mildred has changed the cauldron into a real well this time. It was a fake well initially in the previous episode. Tragar gives his usual life force warning, and then the advisors guide Chris into the well by all speaking at once, which is always a really helpful bit of guidance, isn't it, Red Engineer?
Right, walk forward. Right. Turn to your left. Yeah, just have to. That's it. That's fine. Walk forward. Can you turn to your left? Turn to your left. Now walk forward. Can you feel the well? Yeah. Right. Now climb into it. One up steps. And another. And into it. Into it.
Come on, clever clogs.
Into it.
You go.
No, that's actually interesting because, like, I found watching this that this is one of the better teams in terms of like directions.
They are, yeah.
Which, so I'm guessing it's like the sort of first level panic because I normally find a lot with winning teams as well. They're a bit clumsy during like the first level, but once they get to level 2, they get their bearings.
It's once they get into their stride, literally in the Dungeoneer's case. But it's there are times even when they're in level 3, this lot have to start getting a little overexcited and they all start shouting instructions at once. But we have, as me and the other Martin have discussed in some detail, there are far worse ones for that than this particular crew.
God, speaking of temporal disruption, though, I have a little story about that.
Go ahead.
Because I remember very clearly in the first series where like Tragar would be like, temporal disruption's imminent, and then the fire would freeze. But it's ingrained in my head where he'd say like, will this team do this and that, or will the dungeon win again? And I don't know whether that was specific to season 1 or not, but I genuinely thought that that's what he said at the end of every single quest. So when I was rewatching some series 2 episodes, and I was just like, where's he saying it?
Yeah,
He's not saying it.
It was pretty much. It's very easy to get that impression from season 1 because it was pretty much the way all but one episode ended in season 1. They just kept on playing the same recording at the end of every episode in season 1 and had everybody going with their forehead against the desk and say, will you say something different, please? And the beginning of each episode, except for the first one, also was the same recording over and over and over. So it was very maddening. It was not great TV having that same sequence used over and over. I think Tim Childs realized fairly quickly while watching it back week after week on the television, maybe we should stop doing that and come up with one for each episode. So season 2 is a lot better in that regard. Certainly, it's a lot better in most regards if we're being quite honest with ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Should mention before we get into the guts of the episode, this is actually possibly the fastest episode of the early years. Chris and team really find their stride almost straight away when they get into level 2, and they just shoot through chamber after chamber at a pace Linford Christie would have been proud of. It was just, I almost wondered whether the production crew were having trouble keeping up with them, getting the next rooms ready.
I wasn't sure about that, but I was thinking before because I was watching this. It starts level 2. And by the end of the episode, they're almost at the end of level 3. So I was just like, Jesus Christ, calm down a bit. Anyone born in Merseyside is just born with the natural gift of speed, so...
beware double meanings when you use the word speed, by the way. But, I think I know what you mean. I spend a lot of time on Merseyside, actually, living in Manchester, and so It's very nearby. So they become the second. Chris becomes the second Dungeoneer to reach level 2. How's about that?
It's raining Dungeoneers! Oh, Master, save me!
Oh, don't be foolish, Folly. You should know better than to sit under a wellway.
Well, I do, now.
Chris ends up in the usual level 2 starting chamber, the monk's cavern, as it's sometimes called. It doesn't have Cedric in it for some reason, but Folly makes his return after 2.5 quests.
Folly was actually my first big introduction to Nightmare, because like I said, my first episode was season 1, episode 5, where he did that the right hand to the left hand riddle.
Yes.
So my first experience was literally him doing that riddle and then the team running into a bomb room.
Now that is a hell of a hook. It has to be said that.
Yeah.
you start with something really surreal and meta, and the very next thing that happens, kaboom! That is going to draw in a lot of kids. It has to be said that. It has to be said. Polly is going to ask them a riddle that, in truth, could have any answer you like and wouldn't necessarily be wrong.
Now listen carefully, Christopher. Fleshy Jack was quick to act, but thought about it later, while Stodgy Sid just thought and thought, but action did not savour. Steady John said, "Steady on, I'll think while I have time, but when time's run out, it's best to act before I'm in the slime." Now tell me, Christopher, and don't delay, except of course for thought. Are you like John, or Jack, or Sid? Choose right and gain reward.
I was gonna say, I was listening to it before and I wasn't really following it.
Yeah, it's basically he's asking you to, he's describing 3 different people, one of which is too slow to act, one of which is too quick to act, and the other one which is just gets it just right. And which one are you? Now, the problem for me with this riddle is that the right answer is also an empty boast, because the reality is you don't know. You don't know for sure that you're going to give it the right amount of time. They say John, Steady John, and so because they're boasting, Folly gives them a reward.
You've got to be cautious to use magic, but not too cautious. Now I know you can use it. I'm going to gift you some. The spell is called Web.
Yeah. This scene actually is another scene I remember very specifically, because Folly, the way he grants the spell, he kind of puts his arms up in the air and does an arch thing like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I remember that specifically, but I think he says the spell is web, but in my mind from when I remember watching it, I remember him going this is the web spell, which is a bit more dramatic.
Isn't it? Yeah, I always notice that gesture and I think, why get excited about a spider's web?
It's Folly.
Yeah, it's he does this really, really grand gesture with his arms. He sort of bends down low and bows and then stands up straight to her dramatically and hurls his arms around. And I'm just thinking, you look like you're drowning while trying to do the butterfly stroke. Just give them the spell and knob off or something, will you? And he does. To be fair to him, once he's given him the spell, he does knob off, and his laughter is even more irritating and unforced than usual. But it is an important moment. They get a very, very useful spell. Oh, by the way, have you noticed at the beginning of the scene, somebody seems to have moved the wellway further back in the chamber, because instead of them landing near the bottom right corner of the cavern, they land almost on top of Folly, who's sitting on Cedric's chair, or well, not chair, I'm not sure what it is, an ottoman or something.
Box thing.
Yeah, a box, that will do. One thing I should mention, when Folly gives them the food, and he says to Christopher, "Don't put any more weight on, for goodness sake." Do you think that might have been a bit cruel to any to any watchers who were have body dysmorphia issues or anything.
Oh my god!
I don't know. I'm
always
always looking at things that they did back on TV back in the 1980s and thinking,
yeah,
they wouldn't do that now. We get a lot of those ones when we're doing these podcasts.
I was listening to some of like the old, not the audio plays from Dunzell Plays, but like the other ones from like Ross and all them.
Yeah, just a quick plug for everybody to make clear. That's the Nightmare Adventures audio series.
Yeah.
It's another bunch of audio plays parodying the gameplay from Nightmare rather than just storylines with the characters in it. Yeah, nightmareaudioseries.webs.com. There you go, Ross Thompson. Don't say I don't do anything for you. And you, Jake Collins. We very kindly plugged yours. Very kindly plugged your plays there. So anyway,
plug ours.
Anyway, they have the web spell. Folly makes an irritating laughing noise, and then he buggers off. And therefore, Chris buggers off through the only available exit, and he enters the Mills of Doom.
These are the Mills of Doom. Beware the darkness below. The center of each cog is safe, but Christopher must risk the teeth to exit. Guide him with care, but hurry.
It's actually the very first few of the Mills of Doom. They didn't appear in season 1.
Really?
Really, yeah, they weren't in there.
There's like a lot of firsts for this episode.
Yeah, it's the Nightmare season 2 is not as similar to season 1 as you might think. There's a lot of there's more changes between the 2 seasons than you might realize. So a really geeky one that I notice. A few other people notice it as well. When they're moving between chambers, in season 1, the chamber will just go straight backwards into a red void from the front of the screen. In season 2, it sort of swings downwards and backwards away from the front of the screen. Only a pure nerd would notice that, but I noticed it. Very first episode of season 2 when I watched it, I noticed it straight away. That's moving differently from last year. I don't know what that says about me. I think I'm telling myself I deserve praise for it.
Just remember the little details.
Yeah, that is an incredibly little detail. It's a rather menacing name, but it is really just another timing puzzle. It just come up with a slightly different form for it. It is an early form of CGI graphics, believe it or not, rather than just hand drawings. There's things moving in the background that are hand drawings, but the actual mills themselves are CGI. And gives you a sort of a foretaste of what some of the stuff that would come along in, especially in seasons 6 to 8. A lot more computer generated stuff.
It was really well done, like regardless of the time.
Oh yeah, it's excellent. One of the problems I noticed with it is that as it keeps on repeating the same cycle, if you watch some of the clockwork in the background that doesn't have anything to do with the cogs themselves, you notice it starts to slow down because I think because the computers at the time were so limited, after a few cycles of the same animation, the computer itself was actually slowing down. The processor was getting overheated by it. So, so at that point, the puzzle actually slows down as well. So it becomes easier to do correctly, but at the same time, it also requires a lot more patience because the cogs, the cog teeth are moving slower and slower, so you have to wait longer and longer to get around. Because of the CGI, because it's CGI. The Dungeoneer, when they're stood on a cog, doesn't turn with it. On the Spin Dizzy, which you see in seasons 3 and 4, they're actually stood on a circle, and when it rotates, they rotate on top of it because it's physically turning. The excuse you got here is the center of the cogs are actually standing still. The teeth are on a groove on the outside edges, and so only they are going round and round. So that's the excuse. It doesn't quite explain how when a Dungeoneer actually steps onto the teeth, he doesn't start getting carried with it. But they spent so little time stood on that bit that we'll let it go. Yeah.
I love this room for this episode only because they obviously keep giving him directions from like their view. So when it's like sidestep to your right, like they're looking at like his left as well.
Yes, as Mr. H has mentioned in one of the notes he's given me, advisor Kenneth gives some of the most unhelpful directions I've ever heard here. So,
God. He gives.
Can't argue with that.
My favorite part was like they were lining him up to go, and then obviously because they told him to go the wrong way, he sidesteps to his left, and then one just goes, "Oh no, he's gone the wrong way."
Oh no, he's gone the wrong way.
Yeah. Do you notice watching closely that Christopher gets away with a late step from cog 1 to cog 2?
No.
No, if you watch closely, you actually see that the two cogs have come apart again direct beneath his feet, and he should have fallen through there. He might have got away with it simply because they wouldn't have had a good animation yet for people falling.
Crushed to death. Fair enough.
Also, one rather interesting detail, or semi-interesting detail, I think it's slightly interesting. The sound effect you get from in the background of the Mills and Doom of the mechanisms moving around, that was recycled in seasons 5 and 6 for the Descenders. Which travelled between levels. The wellways are what we used to travel between levels in the first 2 seasons, but they came up with more and more different methods starting in season 3. And the Descender, which is basically just a fancy name for a lift, was introduced in season 5, and you could actually use on and off right up until the end of the series.
That would be interesting if it turns out like the mills we used to like power the Descender in later seasons.
Were the Mills of Doom powered with techno sorcery? Yeah, it's actually a question we've explored a bit in the audio plays. So yeah, there is a little bit of techno sorcery before Lord Fear arrived.
Yeah,
this is an example.
And Mogdred was like, surprise.
What am I? You were in a hallway, like a bit like a cavern. You're on a bridge, don't move. Underneath the bridge, they're like all worms, like that was on the level.
Hurry, team, for this is the Vale of Worms. One false step here, and Christopher will be feeding them.
Mr. Hardy, your spelling is atrocious. I've just checked the notes you forwarded to me, and you spelled veil like the sort of thing women wear over their faces. No, it's VALE, Mr. H, not VEIL.
I have been editing for so long. So long. About the spelling, do I look like I give a
Veil covered in worms.
Oh, yeah, can you imagine that? A veil of worms. Ah!
Awful!
What a horrible thing to do to a woman. God almighty.
I present you the bride. Oh, but they could have done without this scene because it's just like all they do is walk straight.
Yeah,
and that's it.
There are better things that are done with it in later episodes. It does rather just get in the way of this scene a little bit.
Go on, it's time, we'll go. Where am I? You're in a smallish room with 2 doors in front of you. One is, both of them are blank, but in front of one there is what looks like a guard, and he's carrying a staff.
Stay where you are, vacant features!
They emerge in the axe room, and it's guarded by Cedric for some reason.
Yes, it's funny that, isn't it? Why was Folly guarding the monk's chamber, and Cedric suddenly been transferred here? And whilst we're on that subject, where the hell is Gumboil, the lazy git? Why isn't he guarding this chamber? Sorry.
Somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, of course, silly me. That's why the monk had to retreat there, and Folly had to nip down the wellway to cover for him.
So yeah, he demands a password. Team doesn't have a password, so they need to cast a spell, and it's accompanied by some spirited Skyrim NPC acting because he has to stand around in silence for a bit, waiting for them to like actually do the spell.
Yes, this is something a phenomenon we've encountered before, and it's also something that you get in the film Existence, where they actually describe it as NPC. When you're playing a computer game like this, the computer is always waiting for you to do a certain action before it let the story carry on. And whilst that's happening, the characters, the non-player characters, are always sitting there just repeating the same action over and over and over and over, and it starts looking embarrassingly unnatural.
What is spellcasting? Spellcasting. Go on.
Password, come on!
E B Walk forward, Chris.
I've always liked that scene. I don't know why, but I've always rather enjoyed. I've always rather enjoyed seeing him getting caught up in the web. The web doesn't convince me nearly as much now as it did 32 years ago. I should stress. It is very clearly just white light lines, but it was good enough for me as a kid, I suppose. This is an interesting point that Mr. H makes. He says he was quite sad to see this happen to Cedric. It seemed much more like a Gumboil thing to him.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. And the reason why is I don't want Cedric to keep on doing the same thing every time he appears. And I'm quite happy for him to get something different to do. If he's always sat in the monk's chamber and he's always asking free riddles of the Dungeoneer, it would have got very, very boring for Lawrence Werber, and it would have restricted the character. The character has developed quite a bit by this point because they've done other things with him, give him a Gumboil moment. Why not? Is this any worse than what happened to him when he had the duel of insults against Folly? For God's sake, that was really, really undignified. Getting insulted half to death. If that's what's going to happen to you, getting wrapped up in a web.
Yeah, maybe that's why he's in this room instead of like the monk room, because Folly just came in and he's just like, oh, fuck this, I'm out.
Yeah, perfect. That makes perfect sense. There will be a goblin horn sound over the bit where you said "f" there. because we don't fucking like fuckers saying fuck on this fucking podcast. You fucking understand me? There'll be so many uses of the goblin horn on this particular podcast.
I'm gonna kill you. Christ. All right, so they go to the level 2 clue room afterwards.
Where am I? You're in a small room. In front of you, there's a flight of stairs. There are 2 exits in the room. You've just come in through one, and there's a door down the stairs on your right. Walk down the stairs. No. Side step to your right. And again. Now can you see the banister? Yeah. Or feeling your way down the stairs.
So yes, the level 2 clue room at last. Here is the hauntingly beautiful level 2 clue room. Yeah, we tend to get a little bit caught up in level 2 clue room. We love it. We really do. We think it's the best place in the history of Nightmare for haunting, and we do get some hauntings. Now, must specify, this is the real reason why this is a special episode, not just for Amy, but for Nightmare as a whole. It's the haunting that appears in a moment's time. We'll come to it in just a second, but this is the big moment. On the table, we've got a small spade. They call it a spoon for some reason. So do you, when on Merseyside, do you when you're digging in the garden, do you say, "Someone get me a spoon, will you?"
God,
why have you given me a shovel? It's useless. Get me a spoon from the cutlery drawer, you idiots! Come on.
It does. To their credit, it does look like a weird shovel. Like it's circular, not square. Yeah. So.
It is. You're quite right.
Scooper.
Because they obviously couldn't be bothered going to B&Q, so they just put something together using clay or something. Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, they call it a spoon. A charm and a key. Oh, bless this episode more than any other. That the key doesn't talk when they pick it up. No, Casper.
You don't like Casper.
Is this heaven, I ask? It probably is. Yes, there is no Casper in season 2 until the last couple of episodes.
What's wrong with Casper?
I am going to give you the benefits of the doubt and spare your life for saying that. But I will only spare it this once.
All right, thank you.
There's also half a grapefruit, which the team seem to think is a broken eggshell. Why they think they're going to get much nutrition out of a broken eggshell, I really don't know. But they still recognise it as a food item. Mm-hmm. It's also nice of one of the advisors to think of making use of the banister rather than forcing a person who's blindfolded to try and walk down the stairs.
Do you think
in the middle?
Any of the Dungeoneers ever fell down the stairs?
I am certain at least one did. There's one in season 1 who really treads extremely heavily as they're going down the stairs. And I've come to think, I didn't mention it at the time, but because I didn't think so, but I now come to think that was actually a retake, and he was treading so heavily to make sure that he didn't have a repetition. But yeah, I think they did. I think they did. The eggshell goes into the knapsack, whereupon one of them realizes actually it's a grapefruit. And then comes one of the big moments in the early years of Nightmare.
Examine the big spoon, Chris. Let's see if there's any...
My. One of the bold ones is with us, I see. One of the bold yet brainless ones. Quail intruder, look upon Mogdred and quail. This is only my image. Continue on this path, and you will meet me in person. That will be interesting now, won't it?
You must understand, team, that no true quest is unopposed. It is in the nature of evil to struggle against truth and justice. Remember, fear lives stronger in the threat than in any deed.
I love the timing of that scene where they're just like, okay, so can you examine the spoon? And then he starts laughing.
It was well timed, that, wasn't it? And when he says afterwards that he's one of the bold but brainless ones, it just, again, it sort of seems a perfect response to somebody looking at a spade and saying, is that a spoon? Mind you, the size Mogdred appears at later, he could have used it as one. This is the moment we've been waiting for quite some time, because it was supposed to happen in season 1, but no Dungeoneer survived long enough. It's the first appearance of Merlin's evil half, Mogdred himself. It's only a projection of him, okay, but that's still more than we've had so far. Up until this point, the only role he's played is when Merlin has given warnings that Mogdred lies ahead in the dungeon. So therefore, I think maybe this is the reason why he's in season 2. He's in level 2 in this season. It's simply to give him an outing. So,
it's come out eventually.
All those lines that John Woodnut learned in the first season, he never got around to speaking. At last. At last we can actually get him to deliver some. Notice that Merlin doesn't appear in level 2 in this at all. There's no Hall of Folly. Instead, Mogdred is the big feature in the second half of level 2.
This is weird to me because from what I remember, because obviously I know Mogdred now, but from what I remember watching it, I definitely remember Merlin. Because I remember him showing up in this episode, but I just cannot remember Mogdred at all. But I don't know why. I just cannot remember him.
Merlin makes an appearance in level 3 in this episode, but he doesn't appear in level 2. It's interesting you don't remember Mogdred, but I do think at the same time that says something about Mogdred in The Cold Light of Day. The way John Woodnut plays him is brilliant. It is absolutely terrifying. His booming laugh is perfect.
Yeah. This is what I love so much about the casting of this show, is that knowing that a lot of the actors played like multiple characters, and John Woodnut did amazing. Like when you do a thing where it's like you can play a good half and a bad half of a character, but still make it believable to the audience that they're two separate people, that is insane. Like massive respect for that.
It takes a lot of doing. It certainly does.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as a written character in The Cold Light of Day, Mogdred really is boring as he really is. His dialogue is so trite in The Cold Light. If you see it written down, I mean, I wrote the script for an audio play 10 years ago called When Five Tribes Go to War, and Mogdred was one of the central characters in it. I quite like writing most of the scripts, but all the scenes Mogdred was in, oh god, it was boring just to write them, because his dialogue is so corny. It is only when an actor like John Woodnut can deliver dialogue like that in a way that makes you not notice how corny the character actually is.
Oh, absolutely. Like I can't remember who played Mogdred for that.
Really, Amy? Really?
But he pulled it off really well in the audio play as well.
It was Martin Harder who played him in the,
Yeah.
in the audio. Yeah, I thought he did pretty well actually. It's not easy to do well with a character whose dialogue is so awful. You know, there was nearly a couple of early drafts of the script where I tried to sort of crowbar in some slightly humoured lines for him. But I read them back to myself. I thought, no, it's just not him. Yeah. So I had to force myself to take the bits out and just write it in a really staid form again, because that's the way. And it was so frustrating, but that's the way he is. And so I felt really sorry for Mr. H when I gave him the part and said, "Do you want to do this? Do you really want to do this?"
It worked in the end, because like I was listening to like all the audio plays back like a few weeks ago, and one of my favorite lines he did, which always makes me laugh, is when like Gumboil comes back after getting like the fake note, and Mogdred's like, "What the blazes are you doing back on level 3?" Like he just pulled that off. It's
excellent delivery. It was excellent delivery from Mr. H. I take my hat off to him for that. That's to say, it's only through sheer force that you can make anything out of Mogdred, and that's the problem. But that's how John Woodnut did it as well. It's just through sheer force. It's just through sheer exuberant delivery that you get anything out of it. Because, as I say, if you just look at the dialogue from the script, if you look at the script of Five Tribes, for instance, and you pick out Mogdred's lines in it, and you read them in the cold light of day, you go, "Ugh, sheesh, yuck. Oh God. What part of 1915 did you get this lines from?" You know, it's horrible to do. It really is.
I just wanted to cut in. I just say I didn't really have a problem with the lines because they were very Mogdred. It's the best way of putting it. So I never really questioned it.
So hats off to John Woodnut, hats off to Martin Harder for both doing a remarkably good job of performing Mogdred, because I wouldn't want to try, because I would really struggle. I would really struggle with them. So anyway, we get our first appearance, and I must admit, first time I saw that scene, I was genuinely terrified. But it is all about actually scaring you rather than being a genuine threat, and that's another of the weaknesses of Mogdred. He isn't much of a threat a lot of the time. He doesn't actually do that much damage. He just scares people.
Until season 4.
Oh, he does actually kill someone in season 4. That's true.
Yeah. Well, technically, he gets one in this season as well, but he doesn't do anything. He just laughs at them.
It's like a lock-in in the Crystal Maze. That one. It's not.
Yeah.
He's not really doing. He doesn't really have to do anything. He just sits there and lets the life clock run out. So.
Yeah. So then he disappears, and then they look on the table, and then there's the charm.
Have a look at the charm. Have a look at the charm.
Emergency, critical life force drain. You are carrying a destructor.
Put it down.
Just in time.
And this is the one reason why I can't stand Traegod in these earlier seasons, because he knows what that charm does. And he's just like, not in this episode, but I know he does another. Just like, "Oh, come on, pick it up, you can do it." Picks it up. "Oh no, it's evil! Put it down."
First things first, just to say, that's one of the reasons why I love Traegod in the first couple of seasons. I find his moral ambiguity in the first couple of seasons so much more entertaining than the Obi-Wan Kenobi he turns into later.
He's just having a good time.
Yeah. But also, I have to say, he doesn't actually do that in this particular scene. He just says investigate the objects in general. In fact, he does keep badgering a later Dungeoneer to investigate something, which does. It was Julian, I think, in Team 10. I think he does that too, and then sort of blames them. And also, he does it right at the end of season 3. So anyway, the charm proves to be a destructor, which drains half their life force in a few seconds. So Traegard gets them to put it down again, and they decide, all right, maybe we shouldn't take that. But then, just to irritate everybody, there's only 2 objects left now. There's the key and the spoon. And they then sit there trying to debate whether to take them. You're allowed to carry 2 objects, and there's only 2 objects that you know are safe to carry. So,
well, I would have loved if they were just like, well, maybe we need the talisman. Why don't we put it in the spoon, and then we're not holding it?
That's actually an interesting idea, because they could then give the talisman to Mogdred later. But, oh well, they didn't have you on the team. They didn't think of that, did they?
No.
But there you are. Yeah. So they are getting into their stride in terms of manoeuvring, but they're still having the odd moment where you think, oh, for heaven's sake, don't be so stupid.
Yeah.
Just pick up the 2 other objects and get out of the room. Which eventually they do.
Where am I? You're in a small room. In front of you there is a man and he's playing with something on floor.
Oi! You! Where do you think you're going with that spade then? Who said you could come in here? Eh? Well, I don't care what you say or who you are. You can't come onto an authorised site without a card. That's a count against the rules of the guild, that is. Of course it is.
Our first view of the mine.
Yeah.
It's also the first meeting with a satirical character, a rather topical character. His name's Bumptious.
Bumptious is a dwarf miner, although he
may
I was supposed to say may. He may not appear very dwarf-like. I sound like Olaf.
Well, he may not appear very dwarf-like, you know what I mean? He's a stickler for the mining rules. You can tell I spend a lot of time in Liverpool, don't you?
Yeah. But yeah, so this guy, he's a stickler for the mining guild rules, and then Chris has a spoon, which he was supposed to take, and then he's just like, oh, how dare you have that spoon without a card? But beggars can't be choosers, I guess.
You got to remember, this was only a couple of years after the miners' strike.
Really?
Which was it was well, I think it's 3 to 4 years, so it was maybe a little bit longer than I'm remembering.
Yeah.
But it was only slightly afterwards. And if you actually study the way Bumptious behaves, you realise he's a parody of Arthur Scargill. And yeah, so it's sort of a bit on the late side, but sort of topical for the time. And Bumptious he's a bit bureaucratic. He's got a whiny northern accent, so sort of central northern rather than Merseyside. But he's there to sort of say, this was the sort of guy who was leading the miners. Is it any wonder they lost? So, it's a shame. It's a shame they lost. I was very definitely on the miners' side, but. Maybe if they'd had a better leader, things could have worked out a bit better. I think is the point that Bumptious is conveying. But, I'm a lefty. I'm a lefty, so I shouldn't be politicizing these things, but I'm going to anyway because I rock.
So he explains in this that his apprentice has gone home sick, which leads me to think, who's his apprentice?
That is actually a question I've never really dwelt on. I must admit that. It would be rather interesting to know now you mention it.
Yeah.
Maybe Gretel. I mean, you see.
I was thinking that.
Gretel actually appears in a later scene with him.
We're just having a little bit of mining.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Can you imagine the miners' strikes happening with Gretel leading them? What do we want? Tea and toad flavored pie. When do we want it? Oh well, I'm having trouble mixing it because the toads are really difficult to mash, you know. But I'll get them to you soon. It would have been a much better, a much less violent miners' strike, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
peace and tranquility.
I think Thatcher would have won a lot more quickly. It took a whole year, the real miners' strike. I think with Gretel leading them, it would have been over.
It was at this point that Martin knocked his microphone out of the socket. Because Amy was too polite to say anything, Martin continued talking for 3 straight weeks before he realized. But that's the kind of thing you come to expect when you record a podcast with Martin O'Doney.
All right, perfect. Right, so yeah, Bumptious.
just restoring my expression to the one it was when we finished recording a moment ago. So anyway, we've got Bumptious. He's an Arthur Scargill impersonation, as we were saying. He was a parody of Arthur Scargill.
Yeah.
I do have issues with this scene, and it's another one of those things where I think they wouldn't allow it today, because what they're basically saying is a miner who has a job which involves explosives thinks that because his apprentice hasn't shown up for that day, I'll take a random passerby who is clearly well under 16 years of age and ask him if he'll help me blow something up.
Oh no.
I think that's a really good thing for children's television to encourage, don't you?
I'm sure it's fine.
Oh my! What a brilliant idea. And it gets worse as the scene continues.
Raise your right hand. Raise it. Come on, raise it. No, just raise it like that. That's it. Under Rule 46B, Category C, Stroke 2, Paragraph B, I hereby propose you for temporary membership of HOGG Hug. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against? Nobody against. Motion carried. Right, put your hand down. Come and stand by this plunger here. That's it. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Right, put your hand on it, but don't press it down whatever you do until I say so. I'm going over to the other side of the pit, and when I say now, you push it down hard. Got it?
Yeah.
Good.
This actual room, or cave, let's be honest, it's not a room, is a very important one because in season 3 it was converted into the minecart ride, or the entrance of the minecart ride. So, which was the first time form that moving between level didn't involve a wellway or at least a trapdoor. So it was the new entrance to level 3. So it wasn't too major here, except as Bumptious' sort of home away from home. But it did become very important in the 3rd season. There seems to be a general consensus amongst Nightmare fans that the minecart ride was by far the best and most spectacular method of travel between levels.
Yeah.
Heading back to the light issue of telling children to use explosives, do you notice the way that Bumptious puts Christopher directly in front of the wall that's to be blown up, makes him operate the plunger, and then Bumptious walks away to the other, way out of the blast zone, and makes Christopher blow the wall up when he's standing right in front of it. Over to you.
Yeah, because what I love about that is that, like, you're making all the points where I'm just like, oh, was it really that bad? Maybe you're just overreacting, and then you're just calling it as it is.
So yeah, he performs this rather elaborate ritual to make Christopher a temporary member of the guild.
Are you standing by?
Listen to him, Chris. Yeah.
Now! Messy. See, you can't get the right powder these days.
Christopher blows up the wall that he's standing directly in front of. Not a single bit of debris gets anywhere near him. There's just some element justice because Bumptious is coughing uncontrollably from a dust cloud that has somehow just bypassed the Dungeoneer completely, and then it all homed in on Bumptious. So justice is done. But there's now a nice big hole in the wall that for Christopher to walk through to get into the next chamber.
Where am I? You're in a big room with 4 doors. 3 of the doors have got portcullises blocking them. One of the doors has got a lock on. In front of you, directly beneath you...
Hurry, team. I sense that something is coming.
Chris, step left. And walk forward. Quick. Keep on. To your right.
It's a simple locked door chamber with the added threat of Mogdra making his presence known. The team get through pretty quickly.
Yeah, there's not really much to mention. This is actually mainly, up to this point, this room has mainly been used as a catacomb-like chamber. Usually coloured a yellowy orange rather than a bluish haze here. But it's pretty straightforward. without Mogdred's laughter, any element of danger would probably be almost imperceptible, to be honest.
There's bones on the floor.
Yeah. That's probably the bones of Richard from season 1.
Legit. Right, I actually had an idea for this where, because like there was a part in, slight spoiler for season 3, but there's a part in season 3 where you find the remains of what was supposedly a Dungeoneer, because it's like all bones and then one of the helmets, which led me to the theory.
In the fire cavern, yeah?
Yeah, it led me to the theory that, like, even though the Dungeoneers, you know, quote unquote die, but it's fine, it's an illusion, they're safe. I feel like they'd go back, but then like a remnant of them, like a copy of their body, would be left there. So I was going to plan this whole story, which I never ended up writing when I was younger. It was after the Geek Week episode.
All right.
Where it's kind of like describing sort of like the remains of like all the Dungeoneers and how they died, and then Stuart would fall down and be like, oh, there's a new one, it's been a few years.
Go on, keep going. Higher. Go on. Where am I? You're in a small hallway. Down one side of the hallway there is a very deep drop, so just stand where you are.
Hello again, my bold puppet. And hello to you, my brave puppeteers. Would you like to see how Mordred pulls the strings?
Beware, sorcery team. Exit fast or your quest ends now.
Walk forward fast.
We're actually very close to the end of level 2 now, and we only just entered it a minute ago. This is a familiar scene. It's been used as a giant's chamber. It's been used as the troll's chamber.
Yeah.
But it's just a basic cavern ledge. But we've got a new figure standing off the side of it, or sitting off the side of it. The cavern ledge at the moment has Mogdred appearing supersized over the edge of it.
Yeah.
So,
don't mind me, I'm just on my throne.
You take away the laughter and the wiggling of fingers that he's doing here as he says he's pulling the string.
Pull the string.
It's objectively very silly looking, but the sheer conviction with which Woodnut and Hugo Myatt are performing the scene is so strong. It's so much belief in it. It convinces you to be scared anyway. But in the end, all Chris really has to do is just walk in a reasonably straight line to the exit.
Where am I? You're in a small room. In one corner of the room there is a well with something on it. I can't really see from here. Could you walk across to the well, please? Yeah.
And they find they're in the wellway room already. I've timed this. They've raced through level 2 in about 12 minutes. So when I say this is a fast-paced episode, I mean it is a fast-paced episode.
There's something here that is essential to your quest, perhaps. But have you time to collect it?
Sidestep to your right. No, get the food first. Go up onto the steps. Now quickly, turn to your right. Just a little turn that forward, quickly. Right, sidestep to your left. And again, can you see reach up with your left react. That's it. Turn right round. Turn right round, put your hand down. Go on, and again, turn right round. Turn again. Right, forward.
We hear the ominous laughter of Mogdred again. There's food on the well, and part of the chalice symbol is in the top right corner. That's one of the quest pieces. Then Christopher needs to collect it. Christopher gets the food, then heads away from the well to collect the chess piece. And while he's doing that, the enlarged hand of Mogdred reaches into the chamber. And this scene actually is scary. It's one of those things where it's a recording. It was at the time. Again, you got to remember in context. The scene was scary. You realise now that it was almost certainly a bit of a recorded bit of the hand, so the hand wasn't going to sort of go after Christopher. but you didn't realize that when you were a kid.
The problem with this scene is something that really distracts me. I remember watching this like when I was finding them on YouTube again for the first time, and when he touches the chalice, I know now it was probably like a glitch or whatever, but it looks like there's something in the back of the room that forms like
something
a little gold
seems
spot.
to materialize directly behind him when the chalice piece disappears.
So like when he runs back, I'm just like, no, but what if that was something important? But now I realize it was probably just like part of the floor just clipped back in or something.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say what it is. It's glowing is part of the problem, so it does look like it might be something important.
Up the well, up the steps to the well. Get in and down in the well. Quickly. Down. Where am I? You're in a very small room with 2 exits, and there's a pile of bones on the floor. They just stood up now.
Welcome to level 3T. Here, every step is danger, but speed is still essential.
It's only our second ever view of level 3. Well, yes.
Warning, Captain Whites, they're blind, but hunt by
Turn
smell.
round, quick. Walk forward. Stop. Turn to your right. Walk forward. Fast.
And we get an appearance from the Cabin Whites, including one who seems to be taller than normal. But even though it's bigger, it's still not exactly difficult to escape from them, because they're not really that scary.
Where am I? You're in a biggish room. You're at the top of a flight of steps. To the left of you, there are 2 doors. And to the left of them, there's another door with a portcullis in it. Can you walk down the steps, Chris? Yeah.
So now they enter the level 3 clue room. My goodness. It's the same quest, and we've had 2 clue rooms in one episode. It doesn't happen that often, that.
Can we talk about this room? Because, I have things to say.
By all means. That's what you're here for.
So the room on the clue table, there's a shield, a horn, and a jewel. Now, I think I vaguely remember watching this at the time. Because this is season 2, and it's the whole thing of like, there's no real bargaining in level 3, you don't need riches. I can kind of forgive this for the fact that it's season 2, and I feel that would be a bit more ingrained once people have watched it and like go on to the later seasons. That's fine. I completely understand. But when you see a shield with a white little orb in it that's just like, ooh, look at me, like all glam like that, why would you ignore it? You obviously need it.
Well, this has always been a grey area for me. The reason to ignore it would be because it's a weapon, and one of the main bits of advice in the adventurer's code that the dungeon is given out.
Yeah.
Unless there's an indication to the contrary, you assume a weapon is the weapon of your enemy. But at the same time, it's not an offensive weapon, so you would give it a little bit more leeway, I would have thought. For me, the main reason to go with the shield there is because it's level 3. Human opposition is almost completely gone by now, so corruptibility ceases to be a big factor down here. So you should, but there's really is unlikely to be any use for a duel on its own.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do understand why they rejected the shield.
That reminds me of one of my favorite fan fictions I actually reread the other day, and it's like they're going through and Skarkle comes up and they don't have anything to stop him, so like I think it's Pickles just like hits him with a ball and he just smashes him over the head.
Or old Skarkill.
Yeah.
You see, you enjoy the blood curdling side of Nightmare still.
Oh,
don't
absolutely.
Don't pretend that your sense of humor has become any less morose and dark.
My name on YouTube is Queen Creeps. Of course, my humor is morose and dark.
Plug. Yes.
Sneaky plug.
Absolutely.
Take the horn and the jewel, Chris. Right now, turn round, right round. Turn to your right a bit. And walk forward quickly. No, stop.
But anyway, after a brief bit of panic when they almost direct Christopher straight into the path of an oncoming Cavern White, beyond that they do manage to straighten up and they disappear through the right-hand exit.
Keep going. Go on. Where Where am I? You're in a
The horn you carry was Joshua's. The wall was brought here from another time, another place. Use your wits.
We're now in the room where Richard and his team in season 1 met their fate. But Christopher is fortunate because they selected the horn from the level 3 clue room. Joshua's horn. Oh, hello.
Pickle.
That's my girlfriend.
Pickle.
Behind me.
Chris, blow the horn.
And again.
And again. Quick.
And again, blow the horn.
Again. Go on. And again. Right. 8, 9.
Well, investigate, team, investigate.
A few blows of the horn produce a surprisingly high-pitched 2-note sound, but it does bring the wall down, as the Bible says, and so the walls came tumbling down. But having got rid of that, it reveals Merlin's meeting point in level 3. An M talisman, entirely animated, appears on the table. So we are now actually in uncharted territory, though. They've now got beyond the point.
Now then, walk forward to the table. Can you see anything at all? What's this? It's a cabinet.
Thou wights, be gone.
Yes.
Congratulations, Christopher. Your friends have brought you far and guided you well. Soon you may have more parts of your quest, but even when you have all the parts, you must still find the way out and make the parts whole again. As a reward for your progress, I gift you one single spell. It is the spell Unitas. Now, be brave. You have but a short way to go.
The whites return. Out fast while you may.
Sidestep to your left.
How close are they getting here? I didn't actually know at the time that it was just 3 levels, because Traeger had actually said in the first season the precise number of levels is not known. So I thought it literally could carry on forever. At the end of season 1, Traeger suggested that the Jericho 6 wall might have been the final hurdle. That was misleading, as it turned out. But because he'd said that again gave this impression, oh my word, now they got beyond that wall.
Yeah, they're like there.
The exit could be on the other side of the next door. No. It gave that impression. So anyway, they get a spell called Unitas. Or as if it had been handed out in the level 1 clue room, I imagine it would be called Unit Arse. And we know which wall monster would have handed it out.
Absolutely.
It's we never find out, alas, what that spell was supposed to do. We never find out.
I wonder if they might have messed up with it, because like I remember Merlin saying the spell is Unitas, and then one of the boys was just like, "What?" So
yeah,
I have a bad feeling that maybe they might have written it down wrong and messed it up anyways.
Well, we'll alas, I don't think we'll ever know. I'm pretty sure Tim Child doesn't have the scripts anymore, as far as I know, and I don't think he'll remember now.
I think it might have been like because they were picking up pieces of the chalice that maybe it was like uniting all the pieces together.
Yeah, but it's later established that you do that by just casting the name of the quest objects.
Yeah.
Anyway, the staircase at the end of the room serves no purpose other than to slow proceedings down, and that's why it's removed later in the season, so they can just walk out through the doorway. When Julian's quest in Team 10 arrived there, there's no staircase anymore. I approve of getting rid of it because, yes, it does slow things down a bit. By exiting this chamber, Christopher's team have unambiguously become the best team so far.
And just walk forward. Where am I? You're in a small room. So, in front of you, on the left and on the right of the walls are 2 doors. You just come in through a door. Next to you is a gargoyle. and he's calling out the world's
Ouch,
doom.
Christopher, or the gargoyle's pessimism will drain your confidence. It's already having a disastrous effect upon your life force.
Right, Chris, walk forward. Go on, quick, till we say stop.
This is a different gargoyle from the one we saw at the end of season 1. That one had a weird hole in its face for water to come out of, apparently. This one isn't blue-coloured. Its chamber isn't blue-coloured. It's a very dark chamber. And it's a particularly mouldy shade of green that the gargoyle's face has been coloured in. So I get the feeling that another gargoyle blundered past and sneezed all over it.
I just find it really interesting that, like, this one just repeats doom over and over, and then its mouth moves, and then they obviously, like, just change their mind afterwards, because then he actually talks but doesn't move his mouth.
A subsequent appearances, Mug appears to come back, I don't think they ever quite settled on what they wanted to do with the gargoyle, because there was another one in season 3, again using the same foundation artwork, but with a moving mouth of a human mouth. What I would say about this one is it appears to be the same gargoyle that was in the Nightmare novella, the first Nightmare novella.
Really?
Yeah, in that one, Traegard and Folly are questing through the dungeon, and they encounter a gargoyle which does nothing but say doom, and its eyes are glowing green, and the green light seems to affect their ability to affect their confidence and makes them become really depressed and eventually almost suicidal. They had a shield, a strange mirror-like shield with an inverted face. What Traegard found was he could raise that shield in front of himself. This is there's a sort of parallel of this in the next chamber, funnily enough. But they found if he raised the shield in front of himself, it would reflect the light from the gargoyle's eyes back onto the gargoyle, and that made the gargoyle so depressed, and it actually jumped. It jumped off the ledge and destroyed itself in the cabin far below. So it's actually a very, very dark moment looking back on it now. And again, I'm not absolutely sure whether it's entirely wise to have teenagers reading books with those kind of concepts in it. But
for kids.
that gargoyle was actually standing on a long ledge rather than in a room. So it just jumped off the ledge once it becomes so much in despair. For some reason, having been destroyed, that gargoyle then reappeared in the games section at the end of the book, when the reader can play as a dungeoneer himself. Now here, Christopher doesn't have to hold up a shield in front of himself. He just has to walk out through the very, very obvious wide open exit.
Turn to your left and walk forward quick. Go on, keep going. Where am I? You're in a small room. In the room there are like, there's a face right in front of you. Like, I can't really see much more. Yeah, snakes. Alright, it looks a bit like Medusa. Right.
That aforementioned shield with a reflector service would have been very handy in the very next room. Over to you, Amy.
This is the fabulous Medusa room. Oh Christ, what happens in here is that they come in just like, ooh, there's a Medusa, and then Traegard just gives...
There's a gigantic face with snakes, and with snakes in its hair. I wonder, what could it be? Oh, is it a Medusa? Oh God, yes, it is a Medusa.
And then Traegard delivers the unfortunate line of,
"What you need here is the magic shield." But of course, you rejected it.
This scene stuck with me because not only was it the Dungeoneer that was affected, but for the first time it was the advisors as well.
Oh dear. Dear, dear. It seems all I'm going to get out of you lot is a stony silence. And as for Christopher, he's certainly no better off.
Like, they all turned to stone. That was terrifying.
What it establishes beyond any doubt is that the Medusa is the deadliest creature in the dungeon. It's probably even deadlier than any of the sorcerers.
I think it only showed up twice, didn't it?
3 times. 3 times.
Oh, 3 times.
Yeah, it appeared twice in season 2. It would also appear in season 3. You need a weapon just to be able to stand in the same room as it. If you don't have it, you automatically lose then and there. So it's an extremely powerful monster. The fact that it can even affect the advisors, again, underlines that it's a powerful monster. But it has to be said the stone effects are a little bit lame today. They were okay for 1988, but it's just basically a freeze frame of them coloured grey. Photographs like that existed since about 1900, so I'm not going to give the series any points for that, but it was okay for the time.
But don't worry, watchers. Things aren't quite so desperate as they appear. Look with me now beyond the dungeon wall. Christopher, Paul, Kenneth, and Christopher, the dungeon defeats you, yet the dungeon salutes you. For the lack of a proper defense, you have failed in your quest, yet you have traveled further and braved more than any other team to enter the dungeon so far. Thus you become our current champions.
By far the best team, by far the best quest so far, but again, it ends in failure and defeat. Because... I'm not absolutely sure why this was. There was no dismiss spell here. And I don't know why that is, because even though they're frozen to stone, you would still require magic to restore them outside the dungeon.
Yeah, I feel like it would have been a bit awkward just dismissing stone, so...
I suppose it might be.
It's fine, they're fine. Disney ending, everything's fine.
It has to be said, later seasons handle these sorts of things better, because by the time you've got that far, you don't deserve a dismiss spell. You deserve something a bit more respectful. So they introduced the Unite spell to deal with that. But yeah, they just seem to be in two places at once. Everybody, you've got statues of them sitting in the dungeon antechamber, and you've got them standing outside waving in that cliched 1980s game show way to say goodbye outside the dungeon. So reflecting on the team, they are perhaps a little unlucky. As I say, it's a bit of a question mark over taking a weapon when there's no clue saying you should. But at the same time, is it wise choosing a gem when you're in level 3 when there's no human opposition to bribe? So,
I think maybe they could have thought like, oh, maybe we could have appeased Mogdred with the gem, but no.
I think Mogdred is above that sort of thing. Mogdred is interested in power, not wealth. He's got his evils, but avarice isn't going to be one of them, because it's that sort of thing is beneath him.
Yeah, of course.
If he wants wealth, he can just steal it very easily. But anyway, the team are rightly saluted as the new champions by default, rather than actual champions. They have been by far and away the best team. They're one of the best teams, I would say, in the history of the series. Not to win, not to actually win. There have been champions in the history of Nightmare who were not as good as that team.
Like, so, I'm not biased because Merseyside.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
I'm a little tiny bit biased, but like, I think in terms of like direction overall and like how they responded to the challenges and stuff, they were never like, they were never like. They didn't
not
into it. Like they knew what they were doing.
They didn't need prompting very often, especially after level 1. Their movement was very fluid, which is why they absolutely raced through level 2 like they were hurdlers or something. And they went a long way into level 3 as well. They went a lot further than an awful lot of other teams who did get to level 3 down the years. As I say, I think I rate them above a number of the sides that actually did win it. I rate them better than Julian's team. Spoiler, who won it? Oh, definitely. Julian's team weren't a bad side, but they had a lot of luck along the way.
Yeah,
and
I'd agree with that.
We will be pointing that out when we get to the appropriate episodes. So this team was right. This team were hailed as champions, although it is only champions by default again. Rather than by right, as it were.
Farewell then, champions, for the dungeon waits upon a fresh challenge. Let's find out from where. Enter, stranger. Name yourself, please.
Mark Wixon.
Well, Mark, call your advisors and let them introduce themselves.
Jonathan, Matthew, Daniel, come.
Who guides this dungeoneer?
Daniel Allen from Witney. Matthew Carey, also from Witney.
Jonathan Cattrall, I'm from Witney too.
Your challenge is accepted.
In comes Mark Wixon, and spoiler. Well, I'm not even going to say it, actually. Just saying spoiler already tells you exactly what's going to happen. Yeah.
So, I know this is only like the start of it, but I like to call this team the Charm Team because spoiler again, they definitely got through a lot of this through charming all the people in there. And you know, the moment this guy walks in with the smile and everything, I'm just like, oh, bless, you're going to be really good.
Everyone wants... You got this picture of dragons in level 3 wanting to give him a cuddle, don't you? It's just, he is a charmer, as Mark Wixon. I think there's no doubt about that. I actually feel really sorry for him because it must have been so embarrassing for him. He's about 12 years old and he's got to go around chatting up men and then a gargoyle, an ugly gargoyle, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. He's joined by advisors Jonathan, Matthew, and Daniel. The team all hail from Witney. Chagar gives the rules rundown and boots Mark through the door. He doesn't. The rules rundown yet again takes too long and really should have been trimmed down again. But he doesn't waste any time saying, "Are you sure you want to enter the challenge?" He just perches it on his head, turns him around, thrusts him through the door. Get in there!
So face the dungeon door and step boldly forward.
Where am I? Okay, Mark, you're in the room. There's what looks like a lever to your right, and there's 5 stars at the end of the room. 5 stars. You want me to move anywhere? No, there's something floating about in the room.
The fire burns, the dungeon twists and turns. The wheel must be stopped if your quest is to start, T.
Okay, Mark.
Mark, the brake lever is over to your right.
Okay, Mark, sidestep to your right. Keep going. Keep sidestepping. Okay, stop. Go forwards till I say stop. Okay, stop. Reach your arm out.
Pull the lever, Crunk.
Warning team, complete temporal disruption imminent. Time is now the immediate enemy. Oh dear, temporal disruption complete. All adventuring must now cease until you phase with us once more.
Temporal disruption sets in during the Wheel of Fate. So you're just getting warmed up, you're just getting started, and then you've got to stop for a week. That was my reaction when that happened. I was already feeling a bit that Christopher had lost after coming so close. And then just as a new team starting up, that face I'm pulling is my reaction. Yeah. Listeners, I'm pulling a really, really pinched look on my face.
No, one of my favorite parts about that is that where Tragar's just like, warning team, and they all just turn to him just like, what are you on about before they freeze?
It's very I'm pretty sure those things are actually done later, but sometimes they put in a bit of video of the team, and their reaction can be interpreted that way when it shouldn't be. This is actually one of the great all-time great sinister send-offs from Tragar we get in this episode.
Yeah. Will this new team surpass our champions from Merseyside? Or will they falter here on level 1? Ah, well, they say all life's a game, so join us again for the game where you can lose it. Your life, that is.
Oh my God!
God, I love that. Oh my goodness! At least one of my mental scars came from watching that moment the first time.
Oh,
he is so brilliant in the first few seasons. Tragar, he is so sinister.
Because I have a theory about that. I like to think, because I've read all the books, but the first book where he's been away from his birthright for like 10 years and he's come back. I have a feeling that it's a mix of him trying to sort of reclaim his childhood, and in the sense he's just there, just like, oh, look at me, I'm playing the game now. But also because he's, had this birthright stolen for so long and he's had to go on the run, basically, it did mess with his mental sense a bit. So by the time season 3 comes along, he's finally sort of got his standing and roped it in a little bit. But these first 2 seasons, he doesn't care. He's just going off.
I wish they hadn't changed it. Even if you can come up with a rationalization for the change in his personality, they should have left it the way it was. It was just perfect. It really was. It was. He really underlines how dangerous and scary that what the Dungeoneers are doing really is. Like handling explosives when they haven't been trained to.
Oh no.
So yeah. Anyway, let's to sum up the episode. My position is this is undoubtedly the best episode to this point, including all of season 1. It was played at a helter-skelter pace. There's loads of new chambers to vary things up, and a number of new characters also make appearances. It's one of the best teams. Dominates it, and they go shooting through the shooting through the levels. I'll do that again. And they go shooting through the levels at a really breakneck speed. And there's a frequent air of pervading doom throughout, especially the level 3 scenes. Level 3 scenes are really dark and grimy and sinister and scary. That is Nightmare as it should be, as it should always be. That episode,
absolutely
one of my all-time favorite episodes, season 2, episode 3. What do you think?
No, I'd agree with you. Like I said, this is one of the ones that stuck with me, and for what we've discussed here, it's just, I think it was the imposing thing of, like, by this point there hadn't been a winning quest, and I was really excited for, oh, this is it, this is the one, and then it wasn't the one. I was like, oh, but like, I think it was like the seeing more of level 3, seeing Mogdred, and seeing just Merlin as well, just like this. I think this was like the first time I kind of remember him, and he was just this tall, sort of imposing figure, but he was clearly quite friendly as well. And it's like, ooh, I'm getting into this now.
So yeah, I do think the reason it really stands out for you is just it's one of the best episodes. It's difficult. It's sometimes difficult to define what makes a good episode of Nightmare and what makes a bad one. I can say without a moment's hesitation, the worst episode of Nightmare is season 4, episode 16. It's just horrible if you sit back, if you sit through it. I'm not going to go into why right now, but it's horrible. But this is one of the great ones. This episode is one of the best ever, partly because it's played at an unusually fast pace for Nightmare, but also it's got such variety in it, and it's got this air of doom surrounding it, and that makes it a great episode. And that's probably also among the reasons why it sticks in your head so well, because it's just it's how Nightmare should be done.
Yep, I can agree with that. Wonderful.
Before we go, I now have to plug a few things. You can find us on Twitter at Nightmare Pod. That's Nightmare with a K, no hyphens, no dots or other extremely phallic symbols. Just all one word, Nightmare Pod, Nightmare Pod. That's our Twitter account. I'll say that again. Nightmare with a K, no spaces, no pauses, no dots, no dashes. Pod, Pod, no dots or dashes between the P or the O and the D either. No P's, although there is a letter P, but it's a pod without P's in it. Nightmare Pod, at Nightmare Pod. That is where you'll find our Twitter account. Secondly, we have a Patreon account. You can donate to it at patreon.com/nightmarepod. That's nightmarepod, K with a K at the beginning. Thirdly,
oh God.
You can also email us at broomcupboardclub@gmail.com. Amy, do you have anything you want to plug for Queen Creeps?
Yes, let me pull out the list. No, I'm joking.
Remember the spellings.
You can find me on YouTube. If you just type in Queen Creeps, which is just one whole word, I'm not spelling.
That's Queen
You can find me
Creeps.
on there.
No dots, no spaces, no hyphens. Sorry, do carry on.
I can't. Okay, so you can find me there. You can find me on Twitter, twitter.com/Queen Creeps. The Q and the C are capitalized. You can. I don't do much work on my YouTube account at the minute because I actually just finished my master's in creative writing at university. So my
That's
YouTube work's
masters spelt M-A. No hyphen, no dots, no spaces. Carry
I'm
on.
going to end you. But
You know what? That's exactly how Mr. H speaks to me towards the end of most of these podcasts.
Oh, Christ. But yeah, I'm going to, I've been doing a load of collaboration work with other channels. So you can find me on Final Boss Fight, where I do tabletop games and Dungeons and Dragons and all that sort. You can also find me on Internet Remix, where I do a lot of the same thing, plus different tabletop things, just other collaborative streams. You can also find me at Man on the Internet, where I do a lot of voice acting, a lot of singing, and that you can all find that on YouTube or on twitch.tv, where we stream. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
We hope to have you a guest again many times in the future, Amy. It has been a laugh, quite genuinely.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for joining us. And as I say, I hope you'll join us again soon. Thank you for listening. And don't have nightmares.
Watch them instead.
Bye now for now.
Bye.
Bye for now. And that's it. We've done it.
Yay!